have your.
Yeah. So we still need temporary.
Okay. I'll call it to order. All right, I'm gonna call to order the meeting. We'll stand for that.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so the purpose of tonight's meeting is just to review the reopening plan. I think we have some recommendations that we're gonna hear from Dr. Cascada, and then we'll discuss it and hear comments from the public and decide what we wanna do as far as the reopening plan and mask policies. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, the proposal is, as has been put out in Parent Square a couple times. My proposals are followed: make masks recommended but not required SAU wide. So all schools follow the protocols as they're implemented at Bow High School. Support those community members who choose to wear masks. Continue to supply masks. I think, if you want to ask Brian how it's worked at the high school, we basically putting all schools in the same protocols that the high school is using. As far as buses goes, I researched that, and we would continue the mask protocol for buses. That is a federal requirement from the TSA. That order is set to expire on March 18th, and if that order expired, we would discontinue required masks if the TSA order is revoked. We would continue to follow the excellence exclusion protocols that are presently in place for those who are symptomatic or test positive. Basically, if you think about the 5-day rules that we've recently adopted, continue to emphasize that people are sick should stay home, and those coming off exclusion will be required to follow the mask protocols presently in place, which is like wear a mask for 5 days. Continue our in-school rapid testing for people who are symptomatic. Continue to emphasize and support vaccination. Continue the weekly COVID dashboard. That was on the last Parent Square. As of 2/16, we had 0 cases at DES, 2 at BES, 4 at BMS, and 1 at Bow High School. And then remove all cohorting and separation. I think the biggest issue that would be is in both BES and BMS, and I'm not sure about DES, moving all lunches and breakfast back to the cafeteria. We actually don't have a waiver to do that, so that would be do that. And then if we needed to implement targeted masking for classes, grades, or schools in responses to a rise in the new variant or a marked change in the COVID environment. Originally, I had proposed to have this implemented when we return from February vacation, but you could make this effective following today's meeting, or I've talked to Adam a little bit. There does have to be a little bit of resetting to get lunches back in the cafeteria at the middle school. So that's my proposal. I think the timing, open to suggestions on timing and questions of me. I think if you look at the back to school messages, I think there were a total of 4. 2, I can't summarize them, but they're basically 2 and 2, what happened. So.
Do anybody have questions for Dean at all? No.
I have a question, I guess. Okay. Dean, so my daughter in the high school frequently ended up in groupings, clusters, or what have you, where she would have to wear a mask then. Basically because of the basketball team, her experience up till now. What do you call it, a cluster or something, right? And so she was basically forced to wear a mask then in those circumstances. Is the idea we would do that through all the schools basically, right? Where you end up
if you've got a cluster.
Yeah.
Right. So if cases rose up and you had a particular cluster in a grade or classroom, then you might go to temporary masking for the time that the cluster is active. Now, with the 5 days of quarantining, that's probably going to be 5 days or less. I mean, I think so. I think answer that question.
No, I just, it wasn't a problem. I fully support everything you said. I started tonight, but I'm just curious how it would work with the others. That's all, just going forward with it. cluster thing, because I know the high school's been mask optional, and she's frequently been in a situation where she's had to wear a mask because of her interaction with people.
Clusters.
All right, if there's no questions, I'll open it to the public. Any public comment?
It's a good plan.
Hearing none.
No, it's okay.
My name's Kyle Fellers. I'm a resident in Bow, live on Crockett Drive, 2 children in the school district, high school and middle school. I'd first like to acknowledge and give thanks to the board for the opportunity to address them, as well as my fellow citizens in attendance and joining remotely. The importance of an engaged and active citizenry is the fundamental building block to this constitutional republic, and it's especially important at a local level. I am disheartened by the recent practice of censorship of opposing views from the official narrative, when that narrative has been so consistently wrong over the past 24 months. I would hope that every serving member on this board and those seeking its election will embrace an open dialogue and encourage our youth that the First Amendment is the cornerstone to a free and open society. The past 2 years, our community, big and small, has suffered a body blow. We're the most divided in my lifetime. Our country's finances are in disarray, and the prospects for younger generations are the gloomiest since maybe the 1930s. It's time we self-reflect and examine how our direct actions have impacted our fellow man, and ask ourselves whether we have contributed to the overall health of the community or whether we contributed to its detraction. Back in August, I warned folks that regardless of vaccination status, everyone needed to be prepared to contract this virus. I urged people in this community to eat better and exercise more, that the key to a strong immune system was not to rely on a leaky vaccine or cloth mask, but an embrace of whole foods, rich in vitamins and minerals, and of course, exercise. Instead, this board embraced fear and hysteria, forcing our children to bear the responsibility to protect us from our sedentary lifestyles. Folks across the country who spoke out about lockdowns and masks on children were canceled and shamed into silence, while the National School Board Association suggested to the Biden administration that concerned parents were domestic terrorists. Now we see parents describing their children's speech problems as COVID delayed. A study out of Brown University has found that young children born during the pandemic has seen a drop of 22 points in mean IQ scores, while verbal, motor, and cognitive performance have all suffered. The study's authors have admitted that the fate of poorer children from less affluent socioeconomic backgrounds is likely to be significantly worse. In the midst of all this, the politically charged CDC quietly lowered standards for speech and early childhood development. These are the direct results of policies this body has supported and endorsed, as they pandered to a segment of the population who were more interested in virtual signaling and mask wearing than taking concrete steps to improving their own health. In closing, I'd like to thank the one brave soul on this board who voted against the mask mandates in August. Despite the hysteria and the terrible guidance from the one MD on the board who showed up at a public outing yesterday without a mask, you used logic and reason and examined all aspects of said policies. You recognize that forcing children to wear masks all day would create unintended consequences that will follow society for years. You stood up to the hysteria and you held an unpopular opinion. You were right, and your vote aged well. Thank you for your courage. Thank you.
Bruce Marshall, 12 Sharon Drive. I got right now a second grader and a fourth grader in school. I came and talked to you back in August. I didn't agree with what you did, with what you're forcing kids to do. Not just a personal, but based on my own children's physician, given their health situations. Working with Dean, finally got my kids back in the school with some mask breaks that they needed late fall. Ironically enough, I was happy to see that before COVID, I saw where they were reading and math wise, and now that they're back, having us basically teach them at home for a year or better than a year, they're much higher than when before COVID came. So their home break actually did them pretty good. Dean, I agree with what you're proposing now. I actually think it should be immediate. The mask should be voluntary starting tomorrow. My second grader, I got a video from the school last week. They were doing country dancing. And if you watch that video in the class, masks haven't been doing anything for some time now. They're dancing in close quarters, masks are half off, and they're having a heck of a time touching each other and goofing around. And if you really think a mask was doing anything to prevent COVID, in those situations, it's not. So I think it's time, to be over with, move forward. I agree with Dean's proposal, although I would start it immediately tomorrow. Thank you for letting me come and give you a couple words. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Ramos. I have two kids, one in first grade and one in sixth grade. And I definitely agree with the change, and absolutely, as soon as we can get this started, the better. The one question I have, though, is regarding the requirement for masking if there was a quarantine situation, or the 5 days that the CDC is recommending, right? What's the sense in going back to school to wear a mask for another 5 days where they've already done their quarantine, their 5 days, the CDC says? So that would be my question.
The way I understand the guidelines coming from both CDC and New Hampshire is they dropped the quarantine to 5 days, but then they said, when you come back, you need to wear a mask for an additional 5 days. And to enforce that, I'm not sure how we've really enforced that other than ask people to do it. Brian?
Yeah, so what we've done at the high school, when someone comes back, I meet with the student or the staff member, the adult. We just have a quick conversation. Welcome back, hope you're feeling good. This is your exit date from your mask. Most everyone I talk to already has a mask on, and it's been zero issues so far.
Yeah, so at the high school, when I walk around, there are a significant number of both staff and students who are wearing masks. So it's not like it's a scarlet letter or anything. I just came back from a quarantine and I'm the only one in the school with a mask on. I think there are people who just wear masks as a matter of practice. Sometimes they feel they want to support kids, and other times they feel strongly. Does that answer your question? It's coming from the DHS and CDC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Motion to approve accepting Dean's proposal, making masks optional effective immediately, with the administration to adjust whatever they need to on the time frame they need to in order to meet those expectations, including cafeteria changes and things, as best they can.
I second that.
Who's it, Jeff?
Any discussion? Okay.
Does everyone want to express a view? I'm in support of the changes.
Okay, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? I think everybody said aye, right? Okay. So I guess then we approve your reopening plan with the masks becoming optional starting tomorrow, and the cafeteria and other things.
As we can work it in.
Yeah, as we can. work
Adam
it in.
just asked for a little time. Laura, you ready to go?
We'll go back in after vacation to the cafeteria. I've kind of been prepped for that. There's some work being done on the cafeteria tables. So
I think that's fair, but masks optional starting tomorrow, and the rest of the cohort and the rest of that
I will
when you can.
get that out to me. There's no other business?
So I think we need to move it on to.
Yes, you do need to go. The board is going to stay for non-public to discuss a student issue that involves both boards. So they're going to make a motion to go into non-public, and we need to shut down the video and go from there.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Motion to go non-public. Oh,
What's the,
Oh.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
We have to go to roll call.
ask what the 91A:2:.
Yeah, I'll